What are the things that you personally try and do in your lifestyle and no doubt recommend to your family and friends to slow sort of nurture this aging process, the big ticket items that you think have the largest impact on aging?
I think the biggest ticket items, unfortunately, are the ones that all of your listeners are already more than familiar with. So don't smoke is absolute number one. If you're smoking and you want to live a long life, this is a terrible mistake. Smoking essentially accelerates the aging process. Obviously, it hits your lungs most severely, but it increases your risk of basically all of the age-related diseases, although the lung ones are the worst. It increases your risk of cancers, of heart disease, not just lung cancer, but cancers all around the body. So do not smoke. I cannot emphasize that strongly enough. Then there's exercise. I think that, there's huge evidence to suggest that having hopefully up to sort of 30 minutes a day of fairly intense exercise is good for you, like moderate exercise for that period of time. And we also know that even the first tiny steps are super important. So if you're sedentary and you can suddenly go from that to getting a 10-minute walk a day, you're already, that's the biggest bang for your buck. You're getting more benefit than someone who's already doing 30 minutes a day of running and ups that to 45 minutes. You're really, really getting a huge amount of benefit for small amounts of extra cardiovascular exercise. I think something that's quite neglected, and I would count myself among this. I don't do as much strength training as I should, but it's strength training. And that's because we know that muscle mass decreases with age. There are a variety of aging biology reasons why that's important. Some of it's to do with things like your muscles are a great place for your glucose to get stored when you've had a meal, but also just the far more basic and everyday, the more muscle mass you have, the more stable you are on your feet. And so that means that if you reach the age of 80, a huge cause of death in older people, at least a sort of original sort of proximate cause, not the proximate cause, but the first mover cause of death, is falling over and breaking your hip. And that's often because you're not quite so stable on your feet, because you haven't got quite so much muscle mass. And that can then lead to a sort of cascade of events, which means that a lot of people who get a hip fracture die within 6 to 12 months. So again, just maintaining that muscle mass is so important. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that, again, it doesn't matter how little you do or how late you start. I saw a really compelling paper when I was researching the book where they'd given a bunch of 80-somethings a strength training program. And they found that they built muscle mass. They were able to walk further and faster after this sort of 6 weeks long program. Absolutely incredible results. And, you would not think that an 80-something, they're obviously not pumping iron, they're not lifting enormous weights, but just starting to make these first small inroads can really make a big difference. So all that stuff is sort of obvious, but I think what's really cool about it is there are two things, right, that understanding aging biology have sort of changed my perspective about those kinds of health advice. The first is we've already talked about this idea of, the longer you live, the more time you've got to benefit from these anti-aging treatments. And so suddenly I'm really concerned about making sure that I do live, those extra few years in good health in order to be, eligible for whatever treatments might become available. But secondly, I think that understanding that these things, they literally slow down the aging process. And if someone said, you can go out for a run a few times a week and that will literally slow down your aging, it's, when you're running, it's super obvious it's benefiting your heart. You can feel your heart beating, you can feel your lungs going, you understand it's benefiting your cardiovascular system, but it reduces the chance of cancer, it reduces the chance of dementia. And that's just an incredible thing that you can do for yourself. It's, it's investment in your future. And that's obviously, one of the most important pieces of health advice. So that's, why aging biology makes those sort of, what can sound, quite drab. And, we've heard them a few times before, probably bits of health advice, a bit more exciting. And then there's the stuff that understanding the aging biology gives you an insight into things that you wouldn't necessarily expect have a huge effect on how long you live. And I think perhaps the one that's most counterintuitive for me is brushing your teeth. So obviously there are a variety of good reasons to maintain good oral health, not least of which is tooth decay is very painful and can be quite expensive. But we also think it slows down the aging process writ large. And the reason is this thing that I've mentioned a few times during our chat, which is chronic inflammation. So let's rewind and see what is inflammation. Inflammation is the process by which your body responds to various threats. It's the process by which your immune system goes and does something about that threat. So if you get an infection, if you get an injury, the cells at the site of that problem will send up distress flares, very much like the ones the senescent cells give out. And they'll be like, over here, immune system, we've got a problem, come and sort it out. And in a young person, you have this process called acute inflammation. And obviously this happens in older people too, it's just less effective. And the acute inflammation happens, they rapidly go and clear up the thing, help the wound heal, blah, blah, blah. Then as soon as the problem's gone, the immune system dissipates and chills out again. And we're back in that state. But unfortunately, as we get older, our immune system does enter this sort of more paranoid state, which is this chronic inflammation, where it's sort of constantly, there's this sort of paranoia, this fizzing, buzzing of immune molecules, which accelerates the aging process in a whole variety of different ways. So we were talking originally about brushing our teeth, remember? And the reason that that's relevant is if you think about what's going on in your mouth, if you're someone with poor oral health, you've got gum disease, you've got tooth decay, the reason that dentistry is in some ways, it's quite archaic. You know, they literally yank out teeth, they fill in your teeth with metal or plastic or ceramic. And that's because your immune system can't ultimately win that battle. Those bacteria, you know, it's sort of war of attrition with the bacteria in your immune system. And so that is essentially a chronic form of inflammation. It's your immune response happening in this chronic fashion. And so by having better oral health, it seems that we can improve chronic inflammation and thereby slow down the aging process. And that's the sort of mechanistic understanding. This first came to light in some studies, I think in the 90s, where it was noticed that people who had cleaner teeth, better oral health, lived longer, had less heart disease than people who didn't. And the obvious thing to say to that is, well, you know, come on, people who have better oral health, they're probably systematically different from people who have worse teeth. Maybe they're wealthier, maybe they have more time to exercise, more time to eat a better diet, you know, whatever the disparities might be. And I think that was a very fair criticism at the time. But as you understood more about the mechanism, more about the chronic inflammation, I think it's much fairer to say that having bad teeth does increase your risk of heart disease. There's even some evidence that it increases your risk of dementia, because we found the bacteria responsible for gum disease in the brains of people with dementia. Now, this could be for two reasons. This could be because the bacteria are taking advantage of the diseased brain to sort of sneak in and get a foothold. But equally, it could be that the bacteria are partially driving that dementia. And I'm sufficiently convinced to, you know, just carry on brushing my teeth, carry on flossing, carry on using incidental brushes, making sure my teeth and mouth are as clean as possible, because I think it's far more than trips to the dentist that you avoid by doing that.
That's right. Also good for the breath. Another added bonus.